C. All right, so let's start with a little bit of review of what we've learned so far in Chapter 8. As you recall, in Chapter 8, we were talking about markups and markdowns, but right now we're doing with the markup case. Remember, this is a resale type shop as opposed to the retail shop, which is what we did in Chapter 7. Retail shops, suppliers tend to give you your price. In a resale shop, you have a little bit more freedom, right? You go out, you find your product, you figure out how much you want to sell it for, and bammo, that's what you sell it for, all right? Now, again, when you finally decide how you're going to mark up your products, you tend to want to be consistent so that if you ever have to report earnings, it's easier for you to do. Right? If you have different products that have different markups, a lot of times that causes your reports to the government to be real hairy. Again, imagine, if you will, that you're a Walmart. Walmart doesn't have 1% markup for all of their vary from department to department, but that's actually how Walmart breaks up its departments, is what's my percent markup on this product? And that actually is what subdivides them into different departments. Regardless, though, you have two styles you can use to mark up your price. Again, remember that S is the selling price, C is the cost, or how much you paid for it, M is the physical markup amount. And generally, your markup amount is calculated one of two ways. Either as a percentage of your selling price, hence markup by price, or as a percentage of your cost, hence markup by cost, okay? Remember that you get a note card on this next test, nice 3x5 note card. This little chart that I have drawn for you here, I like to call this my note card help. You should have this somewhere in your note card so that you know what to use when, okay? Because these are the four equations you will use when you phrase markup by price in my examples over there. Or these are the equations you use when it says markup by cost, which you see over there as other examples, all right? So, last time we derived, or we created all of these equations, and now I just want to use them today, just to review, okay? So, I mark up 55% by price. What is my selling price? Okay, first thing I want, when you attack these problems, circle which set of equations you're going to use, okay? So that you remember and you use the correct ones. Right? It's not, you know, the nice thing about it is that there's not 10 different ways for me to tell you that you're marking up by price or by cost. It's always going to say this, and that's it, okay? There's no other way to say it. So when I say markup by price, that means use this set of equations, all right? Now, all you have to be able to do is take the data that's in the word problem and write what I gave you. It's going to be two of four things usually: selling price, cost, markup, or rate. So, I buy a TV for 65 bucks. What is that? Cost. So you will say, oh good, cost is $65. What else did I give you? Careful. You gave me the rate, right? I gave you the markup rate, but you still need to realize that it's the rate, right? So tell me that it's 55%, and as we've been doing for 3 weeks now, as soon as you write a percentage, you will convert it to its decimal so that when you use it in a formula, you use the right number, okay? Please be careful with that. All right, so now, what am I asking you to find? It's asking for the selling price. So you go back to your equations and you say, where are my equations where I have S in them? Well, here's the first one. Do I have the cost? Yeah, I got it. Do I have the markup amount? No? Oh, crap. Skip that one. Move to the next one. Do I have the markup amount? No? Oh, crap. Move to the next one. This one solves for cost. It has the selling price and the rate in it. We could use it, but this is the same equation. These two things, folks, are exactly the same. This one you use to calculate the selling price. This one you use to calculate the cost. So in this case, this is the equation you are going to use. You are going to use that the selling price is the cost over 1 minus the rate. Please, on the test, write the formula down. You don't have to, right? Again, what I really want you to be able to do is to get the right answer. But if you write the equation down and you accidentally screw up your calculator calculation a little bit, I can give you partial credit. If you just write the answer down without the formula. Good. Okay, so you understand, adjust accordingly. So now all we have to do is take what I'm given, plug it into my equation, and punch it out in the calculator, right? Now it just becomes a calculator exercise, right? Once you have written down everything that you have and what you need to use, do it. So you'd get out your calculator and go 65 divided by parentheses 1 minus 0.55 parentheses, or you could look at 1 minus 0.55 and say, wait, I know what that is. Whenever you take 1 minus the rate, that's the same as the complement, right? So you could say that I'm going to divide this by 0.45, and it will say that your selling price is $144.44. Please, 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 pretty please, when you are looking at these problems and when you're done calculating what the selling price is, make sure it makes sense. If your cost is 5, your selling price must be more than 65, okay? In your businesses, you are always going to make a profit, period, okay? If you ever tell me that the selling price is less than the cost, I will be sad. And you don't want me to be sad, okay? So it's a real easy thing to check. Is my price more than my cost? If it is, good. Move on to the next one, okay? All right, so let's try the next one. I sold an iPad for $177. I mark it up 42% by price. How much did I pay for it? All right, so first thing you do, make sure you use the right formulas. So we're still using by price, kick butt. What did I give you in the first sentence, though? This time I gave you the selling price of $177, so tell me that that's what S is. And then likewise I gave you the markup rate, so you know that the rate is 42%, and you immediately go, ah yes, Marshall, I know, 0.42. And then remember that my last question is asking how much did I pay for it, or what was the cost of purchasing this initially. Please remember that you are the seller. You are not the buyer, okay? You are running a business. I'm assuming that this is what causes some difficulty for students, is that they think, well, somebody sold it to me for $177. I'm going to buy it I'm going to sell it to someone else for more than that. And it's like, well, you're the shop. You're the one who sold it for $177 to someone else. I'm trying to go back into history to figure out how much I paid for it initially. All right? I'm not sure. I will try and figure it out more later. But at this stage, I am trying to figure out what my cost is. And over here on my markup by price formulas, here's my formula for calculating cost. It's just the selling price times 1 minus my rate. Again, now it's just plug the numbers in. So 177 times parentheses 1 minus 0.48 or 42. And we'll see that what I paid for this originally was $102.66. I could, if I wanted to, on this problem, ask you what the markup is. If I asked you what the markup is, what would you do to find it? Good. Right? If you wanted to know what the markup was, you would just take the selling price and subtract the cost. Remember that your markup is always your profit. All right, so let's move on to number 3. I buy a camera for $38. I mark it up 180% by cost. We've switched techniques here. Now I want to know what I sell it for. All right, so I buy the camera for $38. What is the $38? That's 38 bucks. And again, this time I gave you the markup rate again, so we're still with rate. It's 180%. Please, again, convert that to a decimal correctly. Don't tell me it's 0.18. It's 1.8. And again, now that we have switched to the by cost formula, now we're going to use this set of equations. Again, please realize that those last two, just like over here, these are the same equation where I've just solved for the different letter. I'm asking in this problem, what's the selling price? Again, you could try and use this equation, but you don't know what the markup is yet. All you know is what the markup rate is. So we can jump to the answer by using that equation. My selling price is equal to cost times 1 plus the rate. Now, plug it in. 38 times 1 plus 1.8. Please be careful. Make sure you add 1 to 1.8. Again, the classic student mistake here is to just multiply by 1.8 and be done. That's not good enough. All right? So I will sell this camera for $106.40. All right. Same type of problem, mix it up a little bit. Again, I am marking up by cost. You will be careful to annotate that you know that. This time I'm selling a car. I sold it for $1,700. That's my selling price. And my markup rate is still 95%, or now is 95%. Now I'm trying to find cost. Again, remember we are on the markup by cost equations. Don't slip. Make sure you stay on the right ones. Here's my equation for figuring out cost given selling price and rate. Plug it in, crank it out. So $1,700 over 1 plus my 0.95. And again, hopefully, you can add 1 and 0.95 together. So 871.49 or 79. And again, make your casual check. My cost is $871.79. I'm selling it for more than that, $1,700. Good. Okay. All right, these 4 problems are very classic problems in this class. These are the classic ones. The reason that these are classic is because getting the answer took 1 step. All right, 1-step questions, they're nice, but they're 1 step. Please don't assume you can always do them in 1 step, okay? That's where number 5 comes into play. Number 5 is instead of me giving you the cost or the selling price and the rate, now I actually give you the markup amount and the rate. All right? So in this particular problem, again, start the same way though, right? We're marking up by cost. Make sure you note to yourself that that's the style of markup we're doing. And this time, I give you what my actual markup is, right? My markup is this $7.52. So I actually get M this time. It's a perfectly viable thing to get. And this time, my rate is equal to 80%, which is 0.8. All right, so what I'm asking for is the selling price. So it would be really nice if I could use this formula or this formula right here. In this formula, I have to have cost and the markup. I only have the markup. Darn. In this formula, I need to have the cost and the rate. Oh, crap. I don't have cost. How can I find cost when I didn't give it to you? Don't forget this equation, okay? This is a way that you can tie the markup amount to the cost when you're given the rate, right? You know that that equation has to be true. And again, you have the markup and the rate. You can substitute those 2 numbers in, right? You can say, oh, $7.52 equals the cost times 0.8. What do you have to do to get cost by itself? Divide. This is a way for you to get to the cost, right? So take 752, divide by 0.8. And you see that your cost was $9.40. Are we done? Would I be happy if you left your answer like this on the test? Why wouldn't I be, Chelsea? Yeah. You haven't quite gotten there yet. You have the cost, which is good. Don't forget your first equation, right? You know the selling price is always the cost plus the markup. You now have the cost. It's $9.40. Your markup, $7.52. Yeah. Last step, just add those 2 together, right? So add the fact that your cost was $9.40 to the $7.52 of markup, and you see that your selling price is what, $16.92? Note that that took 2 steps, okay? Nothing wrong with that. Should be able to crank that one out. All right. Questions on the difference between a markup by price and markup by cost? Again, I expect you to have these written down on your note card so that you know how to do them, or you know it already and you don't need to write it down on a note card. That's cool too. All right. I'm not going to erase that side, just this side. Oh, okay. I'll leave these up for a bit more. All right, so again, if you remember back to Monday, we talked about kind of what the difference is between markup by cost and markup by price. Markup by cost tends to be firms where you just you mark up the price to the price once, and then you stop, and you never change it, right? You tend to have a fixed markup amount, and it's a 300% of cost, and that's what it's going to be forever, right? If you are going to run a business where you change the price more frequently, a lot of times you will change your scheme to be markup by price instead of markup by cost, because then when you change the price frequently, the change process doesn't take much work. Let's see why. All right. So I am selling let's say I'm selling a painting. I am a art collector now. I'm selling a painting. The price is, let's say I set it at $885. I have a bunch of other paintings, but this is the one that I'm studying right now, right? Because of course I'm in an art store, and since I have a long ponytail and a goatee, I'm an art dealer. So isn't that how it works? I suppose I should actually shave on occasion, but we'll get there eventually. All right. Anyways, I have this painting in my art gallery, and I hold it for a couple of months, and at $885, I don't quite sell it. What do you think I'm going to do? Yeah, I'm going to mark the price down. So after 2 months, I mark down, say, 12% by price. And yes, you can figure out what the price is, but let's not jump there quite yet. Let's assume that another 2 months goes by. I still don't sell the painting. What am I going to do? So another 2 months goes by. So I better mark it down again. This time I do it 6% by price. So half as much as I did the first time, percentage-wise. And now, again, 2 more months go by, and still this painting hasn't been sold, and I'm kind of like, what the heck, right? Turns out that the painter of this painting, after 4 months, you discover that the painter of this painting is actually really Picasso. You didn't think it was a Picasso. You thought it was a ripoff. But now you took it to some art specialist, and he comes back and says, this is actually a real Picasso. Why are you selling this for, like under $100,000? And you're kind of like, oops. So what do you do with the price after you discover that this is a real Picasso? So you find out painter is famous. Maybe it's not a real Picasso. Maybe it's, it's a Micasso. But, it's almost a Picasso, but the M is a P. Regardless, though, now you think he is famous. So mark up by mark up the price by let's go with 45%. So what am I going to ask you? Yeah, what is the current price, right? After this fun that we have had, all right? So we lowered it by 12%, we lowered it by 6%, and then we raised it by 45%. All right? Realize that we didn't do all of these at once, right? We lowered it by 12%, and then lowered it by 6%, and then raised it by 45% from where it was. All right? So normally, when you would attack this problem, you would attack it one step at a time, right? So you would say, okay, how would I figure out what the price is after a 12% discount? Notice I gave you a little bit of a hint there. It's a 12% discount. Multiply complement. Exactly. So what's the complement of 12%? Yeah, so this is 88. So you'd say, oh, take the price, $885, and multiply by 0.88. And whatever you get, that's the new price, right? After those 2 months. Now, 2 more months go by. What do? You do another discount. How would you do another discount of 6%? Exactly. So this number, whatever it is, and I don't even care what it is, I'm just going to leave it written like and multiply by 0.94. This is an exact duplicate of a chain discount, folks. It's the exact same thing from Chapter 7. It's just that it's not a chain discount. What it is a, whoops, we had to lower the price, and whoops, we had to lower the price. Cool thing about it is that those two things are actually the same, right? 2 whoops make a chain. All right, now the last part is where it gets slightly tricky, all right? Because what we have to do is now take this price, which whatever we get, and we need to add 45% of it back to that price. I told you it was straightforward. You divide your answer by 0.55. And you're on the right track, but that's not quite right for this problem, okay? 0.55 is how you would convert it to being a partial payment. This is not a partial payment. It's still, in theory, a full adding of the price. Now, the guide that I will give you is that when you discount the price, you multiply by 1 minus the rate. When you're adding to the price, guess what you multiply by? And again, the reason why that is because you're going to take this number, whatever it is, 885 times 0.88 times 0.94, you're going to multiply it by 0.45 and then add it back to that number. The 1 is what gives you the number, and the 45 is what gives you the additional percentage. So to figure out what our price is, 5 times 0.88 times 0.94 times 1.45. And we'll see that after this stream of different events, our price has now become $1,061.50. Now, what I like to point out to students at this stage is notice what we're doing. All we're doing is multiplying by a specific number. So let's suppose that I rewrote this problem, and instead of hearing about not selling it first, suppose I read in the paper that this Picasso was really famous, and I raised the price first by 45% from the very beginning. And after 2 months, it didn't sell, and so I cut the price by 12%. And 2 more months went by, I cut the price by 6%. So in other words, raise the price first and then lower it twice. The answer, the ultimate price, is still the same. Why? Because all we're doing is changing the order that we multiply these numbers. If you multiply by the 1.45 first instead of last, does it change the number? No. So when you are dealing with multiple discounts, whether they're discounts or increases, the order that you do them in does not matter, all right? And remember, when we did the chain discounts, we had the same sort of a thing, right? If we have a chain discount of 10, 5, 2, it's the exact same discount as a 2, 5, 10, right? Because the order doesn't matter, because all you're doing is multiplying by a specific value. That's perfectly okay, except you wouldn't multiply by the 1.45 yet. You would do the 885 times 0.88 and times 0.94. You'd figure out what that number is, because those are your two discounts, right? Okay, so 885 times 0.88 times 0.94. 732.07. So technically, after my two discounts, this is what the price is. Now, I need to add 45% on top of that. So the old way of doing it is to say, take 45% of this number and add it to it. And the cool thing about it is that if you take 45% of this number and add it to it, it's the same as multiplying by 1.45. Okay? So your thinking is absolutely right. It's just that the difference here is that instead of having to multiply and add, I can just multiply by one number. So when you subtract the rate or deal with complements, it's a discount. When you add the rate, now it's the opposite of discount, hence it's a price increase. But you could still, I mean, if you wanted to do this problem in 3 steps and, take 12% of this number and subtract, and then whatever number you got, take 6% of that, and then whatever you got, take 45% of that number and add, you will still come up with the same number. All right? That's the joy of this, is that I'm giving you a shortcut, which will make your test-taking life faster and easier if you can remember it. All right? All right. Now, that takes us through all of the markup and markdown stuff. So, now we need to start putting this into play. So, section 8.3 in the text talks about perishables and how do you deal with those in a business setting. I like to think of it as the bake sale example. If you read the text in this section, they're going to give you a formula that I don't particularly like. And so what I'm going to do is give it to you in a more natural approach, or what I consider to be more natural, but it's going to look very different than the way the book does it, okay? So please realize that I'm going to show you a way to do these problems. It's going to give you the same answers as the way the book does it, but it's going to be less formulaic. I'm going to give it to you as how would a business deal with it, all right? So bear with me a little bit as I explain this. The idea, though, is that you're trying to make a profit on a perishable set of goods, which means that when you go to sell the goods, some of the goods are going to be, well, not good. They're going to be bad, right? So when you make cookies, every now and then one of those cookies, it breaks, right? You take it off the cookie tray and you go to set it gently down onto the cooling rack, and unfortunately, when you set it down on the cooling rack, what happens? It splits, and so you don't eat it because we're all trying to watch our figures, and so we're not going to do that, right? So we just say, oh, we hand it to our dog, and the dog eats it. Isn't that the way we do it? Okay, yeah, I would eat it too. Okay. But the accident may or may not be because of the cookie breaking, but the fact is an accident occurred and you had to eat it, or someone had to eat it, maybe not you. And so when you go to sell your cookies, you don't actually get to sell all of the product that you made. All right, so how do you take that into account? All right? So the way I like to solve these problems, solve using what I call the three-step approach. So this is sort of my own envisionment of how this problem works. Step one is to figure out how much money you need to make. Please remember that when you do this problem, or when you're doing these problems, that you must cover your costs first. So a lot of times what we tend to do is to think, oh, as long as we make the profit, we're all good. But if you want $500 of profit, remember that you may have had to do $200 first. And so if you want $500 of profit and you had to spend $200, that means you actually need to make $700, because $200 of the $700 covers your cost, and then the $500 are your profit. Okay? That's the idea behind this. Make sure that you include your costs with your profit. All right? Step two is figure out how many items you're going to sell. And remember that there are perishable goods. So some of your cookies will accidentally fall into your mouth. It's purely an accident, but that means you're not going to get to sell that cookie. And that means when you sell your other cookies, all of those other cookies have to make up for the fact that you couldn't resist. Okay? And your last step is the easy step. The price for each of your cookies is going to be the amount of money you need divided by the total number of items that you're going to sell. Because that's what price is, right? It's money divided by items. So when you sell all of the items, when you multiply by all of the items will cancel and you'll be left with however much money you needed to make. That's the three-step process. All right? So the best way to explain this is to just do an example. So let's just dive in. All right, so I want to make a donation to math BTC students. So I want to start a scholarship for the people who take math, because I think people who take math deserve a scholarship, because it's fun. All right. So how much am I going to spend in order to make? That's it? You guys are only worth $50? You guys are worth more than that. All right. All right. So. I'm going to spend $200 on cookie supplies. I'm a little bit richer than you thought I was. $50 is probably what is real. Yeah, exactly. You and me both. But let's imagine that we all pooled our money together. I think that the 6 or 7 of us could maybe, that we're all poor. Yeah. Okay. The fact remains is I'm going to spend $200 on cookie supplies. Realize this is setting up the costs. Don't forget that you need to pay yourself back when you run these sorts of things, right? I want to donate 200% of my costs. So normally, when you are determining what your profit is, it's going to be based on how much you spend, all right? And that's just the way business works. In order to make money, folks, what do you have to do first? You got to spend it, okay? So in general, this is just setting the table for the way business works. Before you can start making it, you got to spend it, right? So we spent $200 and we decide that we want to make 200% of those costs in profit, okay? So, $200 worth of cookie supplies. I mean, and this includes eggs, flour, sugar, oven time, new cookie sheets, nice, cool, dry, cooling racks and stuff, right? So, how many cookies do I make with $200 of expenses? Like 800, 900? Okay. So, I can make. Let's go with 800. 800 cookies. How much of a sweet tooth do I have?
3%.
What?
3%.
Wow, you're giving me a lot of credit. I can make 800 cookies and expect, let's go with 8% accidents. An accident means, you accidentally drop the cookie, Well, yeah, I mean, but if it doesn't stay on the ground too long, you can eat the whole pan. You're running out of ink in your mechanical pencil? Well, I do have a pen if you need it. Do we have lead? Are we good? Okay, so now that I have set the table, now we have to figure out what the price is so that I can accomplish my goals. All right. So, step one, how much money do I need? Please, 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 don't forget your costs. The first thing you have to do is get your $200 back, right? Because you spent it on eggs and flour and sugar and baking soda and chocolate chips and et cetera, et cetera. How much profit do I want to make, or how much do I want to donate to BTC as a scholarship? 200% of what? Of the $200, right? Because it's based on my cost. What is 200% as a decimal? 2. So what's 2 times 200? In other words, I want $400 worth of profit, so I need to make $600. Do you have a writing utensil now, Jill? Step 2 is, how many items am I going to sell? How many did I make to begin with? I made 800. But obviously that's not how many I'm going to sell. How do I get right to the number that I sell? Multiply by the complement, right? So I have an 8% accident ratio, so multiply by 0.92. How many cookies am I selling? 736. Holy crap. I am not going to feel well tomorrow if I eat 64 cookies.
Dog got a couple cans.
Yeah, that dog is out in the back throwing up too. Or worse. And let's leave it alone. And the nice thing about it is that now step 3 is always the easy step. It's basically take 1 and divide by 2. $600 divided by my 736 cookies. What am I going to charge per cookie? Somebody give it to me, the nearest penny. 82. Again, this is just a minimum price that you need to set your cookies at. if you're actually having a cookie sale, would you set the price at 82 cents? Not unless you want to be dealing with pennies the entire day. So what would you probably set your cookie price at? Yeah, to make it easy, you'd set it to $1. Now, when you're running this cookie bake sale, there may be other people running cookie bake sales at the same time. If all of their cookies are set at $1, what might you do instead? Yeah, maybe you'd say 95 cents. Maybe you'd even be nicer and say 90 cents, right? Because dimes are easier to deal with than nickels. Why? They're smaller. They're lighter. So somebody can give you $1 and you can give them a dime. They'll give you $2 for two cookies. You give them 2 dimes, right? Nice, short, simple change. And the reason, of course, is that you want to make sure that you sell all of your cookies, right? I mean, if there's enough other people making cookies and they're all the same price, unless you really, really, really do have a secret ingredient that makes your cookies better.
Special cookies?
They may be special. I don't know what that $200 went towards. Cookie ingredients. True, but I mean, you could put them in cookies too. Okay, but the fact remains is that you have to have the price set to at least 82 cents, all right? But again, the formula that the book gives you, it'll give you the same answer. It's just a little bit more of a nasty formula than this, which is, to me, relatively straightforward. Figure out how much money you need, figure out how many items you're going to sell, divide those two, all right? And the cool part about it is that this actually does apply to more than just bake sales. Why would this apply to, say, stores like even, say, Best Buy? Things break, right? And can you sell a broken item? Probably not. I mean, and if you do, you're going to sell it for a lot less than the 82 cents an item, or whatever the number is. What else happens at stores? Theft, right? That's a factor that you have to put into your pricing scheme, right? If you're going to mark it up a certain percentage, but you know that you're going to lose 5% of your product because people steal stuff from you, you have to raise the price even more. These are factors that go into place. I guarantee you that every shop out there, from the smallest to the biggest, has some sort of a theft percentage in its calculations to determine what the price of its goods are. Because you have to make up for it. All right? And that's just part of the deal. So while this perishable goods thing, it makes this a little bit more easily seen, right? And we all get to eat cookies in the process. But it actually does apply out in the business world, and it's for the things that suck about business, like dealing with theft, dealing with broken products, dealing with returns, all of that other kind of business, all right? Again, you have to factor those into place when it comes to the price, and again, remember that almost always, all of those things make the price higher. All right. So, 3 steps to the perishable goods example. All right, now there is one last section that we need to cover. Okay. So the last section we have to talk about is where we start to talk a little bit about economics. So for those of you who've had me for economics or are currently taking economics from me, sorry, back row, you will have probably seen this before. All right? So imagine, if you will, that I start my bake sale. And I set my cookie price at, 85 or 90 cents, and I sell all of my cookies. And one of the business people that was at this bake sale tastes one of my cookies and says, wow, for 90 cents, you can make cookies that taste that good? Let's start a business. He says, look, I've got a warehouse in Janesville that I'm not using for anything. I've got ovens. Let's mass produce, right? So instead of just making 8 800 cookies. He's like, how would you like to make 800,000 cookies a month? And if I'm making $400 by making 800 cookies, if I make 800,000 cookies, i.e. multiply this number by 1,000, I make. What's 400 times 1,000? 400,000? Maybe a good business idea? Of course it is. So we open up a business in Janesville. I start making, 800,000 cookies a year or whatever, however many you make. And profit rolling in, $400,000 a year. When you have lots of money, what are you going to do with it? Reinvest, exactly. So I'm going to open up another store. I say, well, look, we've been doing the analysis and we knew that Janesville needed 800,000 cookies in a year. Well, let's go down to Beloit. Do the same thing. So you take that $400,000 you made, you reinvest it, you find a warehouse, you still have some ovens, you slap them down, you start making cookies in Beloit. Suppose in Beloit you only make 700,000, but again, you're still making cookies. Again, your profit, another $300,000 the next year. So now you're making $700,000 a year. What are you going to do? Rinse and repeat, right? Go up to Milton, go up to Edgerton, go over to Broadhead, go over to Monroe, etc. Grow until what happens? Eventually, yes, you will. Death is inevitable for all of us, I agree. But eventually you will saturate the market, right? So you will expand into, Madison, and you open up a factory there, and unfortunately you don't make money, and then you stop, all right? Now my question to you is, you have 6 or 7 factories that you're trying to keep track of. How do you keep track of 6 or 7 companies? Managers, right? But you don't want to hire people because you want all the profit for yourself, and because you have taken a Math and Business Applications course, you can do this on your own. So what you do is look at multiple businesses as a full company. So one of the things that you have to do when you're dealing with your business, where it's multiple businesses, is now you can't look at each individual shop as a unit by itself. Now, you maybe hired a manager to do that, but even the manager of that one shop is only going to send you that data for the one shop, and it's your job to put it all together, all right? One of the things that you will deal with when you have to send out corporate earning reports, so at the end of every year, once you incorporate, you have to send a corporate earnings report to the government telling them how much money did you spend, how much money did you earn, what did you make, and then you have to pay the required taxes that come along with all of that profit, right? So one of the things you have to do is to figure out how much you spend in order to earn. Now, costs, how much money you spend, they get broken up into 2 categories. Econ people? What is it? What are the two pieces of total cost? Fixed costs and variable costs, right? You have to subdivide your costs up into these 2 categories because the government demands it. And it's really also because the rest of the business world demands it as well. They want to know this information, right? When you incorporate, you volunteer to give this information to people. It's part of the deal. Fixed costs. These are costs you're going to pay even if you don't do anything in your factory, right? So imagine, if you will, we expanded to 6 or 7 different small cities in southern Wisconsin, but when we tried to get into the Madison market, we lost money, and so we closed the factory down. Now, we couldn't sell the factory because we couldn't find a buyer. So what do we have to pay even though we're not making cookies up in that Madison factory. What are those types of costs? Yep, mortgage or rent, whichever one you're doing, right? So if you bought the place and you had to borrow, you have a mortgage. If you are just renting the place, you have to continue to pay your rent. Just because you're not being profitable with that property doesn't mean you can get out of your contract, right? What else do you have to pay? Utilities, right? You got to have some lights on in the place. You got to have some heat on in the place. Taxes. Oh, yeah, there's always taxes. Insurance, very good. That's another one, right? You got to have insurance anytime you own property, because if somebody accidentally trips over a stone on your property and, breaks their hip, it's your responsibility to pay for it because it's your property. Therefore, you need to have insurance to cover it. What else is a fixed cost? What else you got to pay for? Maybe not necessarily a bad idea, right? I mean, this building has equipment in it. It's got at least windows and utility type stuff that you don't want people vandalizing and all that sort of stuff. So maybe you hire a security guard to go around, sit through the night for minimum wage or something like that to make sure nobody goes in and trashes your place, right? I mean, these are the sorts of things you're going to have to pay for. Again, nothing is made, all right? Now, VC is variable cost. And this is the cost of actually doing stuff, right? These are costs of production. As you produce more, these costs also naturally go up. All right? So what types of variable costs are there? Labor, that's always the worst one, folks. The highest cost for almost every business is its labor. And of course, why is labor the most expensive? Why are we so expensive? Well, now that the Affordable Care Act is almost law, what do all employers have to do? They got to pay some benefits, right? You got to pay for insurance. And if you don't pay for an insurance, what happens? You have to pay penalty taxes. So there's definitely insurance, and you better believe that there are taxes. And those taxes include all of the taxes of running a business, right? So there's payroll taxes, there's value-added taxes, there's penalty taxes. All of the taxes they're all in there, all right? What else do we have to buy to make stuff? Well, you got to have equipment. Now realize that normally when you buy the equipment, though, you buy it once and then you don't have to buy it again, right? So when you say equipment, what do you mean by that? Maintenance, all right? Right, if you're going to run the factory, that equipment that you bought once, which is often considered a fixed cost in its initial purchase, it's like rent or mortgage. Once you have to maintain it, though, that's, obviously the more you use it, the more you got to fix it. What else is in there? If we're going to make cookies, what do we got to buy? Yeah, we got to buy eggs and flour and sugar and baking soda and let's just call all of those things raw materials. So the stuff you have to buy that allows you to make stuff, right? So if you were, if you were a pen factory, it would be, the plastic that this thing is surrounded by. It's the caps. It's the whatever that stuff is that you use to whiteboard with, right? That sort of stuff. Is there anything else inside of here? Don't forget you guys run the company. Oh. Is your pay based on how much you produce? Yeah, so that one, it's like, is it here or is it up there? Depends, all right? Now, the main reason that I go over these, I'm not going to test you on this kind of stuff, okay? My econ students, I will. Sorry, guys, you're going to have to know this. But my math guys, from this side of the world, I don't care that you know what these things are, but what I want to do when I get to these is to point out what businesses do to deal with business, all right? So generally speaking, variable costs, these are the costs to produce. If these numbers are low, your business looks profitable per unit, which is the number one thing that businesses look at when they're looking to get taken over. Businesses want you to be cheap. If your variable costs are low, you're cheap. So when you are running a company that you want to get purchased by someone else, the way you make it look attractive to them is you make sure that there are very few variable costs. Notice that insurance could go on either side of the line, right? So if you're trying to sell your business, what might you do with all of your insurance costs? You'll move them up onto the fixed side and say, oh, that's not part of business operations. My costs on average per unit are much smaller. Likewise, you would take your pay and say, no, my pay is not based on production, it's a fixed cost, because that makes your variable costs even lower. Okay? And that's if you want to sell your business. Shh. The opposite works as well, right? If you don't want your business to get bought, again, you want to make it look like your profit margin is very small. So you will take any of these things up here that might be able to go into the variable cost side, and you push them down instead. This is all legal, okay? Again, if there are savvy businessmen out there, they could potentially see when you're doing this, but you don't have to share anything more than totals, all right? And this is the kind of stuff that you have to work with when you start running your own business, is decide how you want to make yourself look. I mean, you may not think it makes a difference, but it does, because if you make yourself look attractive, then people are going to want to buy you. It works in life and it works in business, right? So same sort of a thing. Silly, true, all right? So don't worry too much about all of this, but I just like to point that out because it's a business fact that you'll someday, and either it will be when you run your own business or even when you're working with or for someone else, right? These are the sorts of things you should discuss. All right, now, the things that we care about in this example are two things. Something called the contribution margin and the break-even point. So, the contribution margin, and I will abbreviate this from now on as CM. This is the profit you make from each unit that you sell. And the way you calculate that is to figure out what your average, start with the price. This is your price minus your average variable cost. The idea behind it is the price is what you sell it at. The average variable cost is how much it costs to make it. So if this is what you get paid and this is how much you paid, the difference, that's your profit, okay? And again, businesses will call it the contribution margin. It sounds like it's really important and special, but it's really just profit per unit. That's what it is, okay? Now, the other side of the coin, the break-even point, which I will abbreviate with BE. This basically is how many items do you have to sell to cover all of your costs. How many items do you need to sell to cover all costs. So the contribution margin, how much you are making over the variable cost. What's not in this equation yet? Well, this is the profit per margin, but what's missing from our cost structure? What else do we need to pay for other than variable costs? Our fixed costs. So the break-even point is how many items do I need to sell so that I pay all of my fixed costs to cover all costs, or to cover fixed costs. Because remember, the contribution margin covers all of the variable costs, right? Contribution margin factors in what it costs to make it, but it doesn't factor in all of these fixed costs that are outside of production, right? So we need to sell a certain number of our items to make up all of this missing cost. And that break-even point, turns out it's a very easy formula. It's just your fixed costs divided by your contribution margin. How do you mean?
Okay, so contribution margin is just your variable cost, but your break-even point is just your fixed cost. Why wouldn't one or the other of them be, why wouldn't you use your total cost?
Okay. So the reason why you don't do this is exactly the way you have to report to the government. When you report to the government, you have to give them some level of a contribution margin. In other words, how profitable are you per unit? And that has to be reported. And again, that's the sort of thing that other businesses are going to look at and say, oh my goodness, your profit per, so you spend 50 cents and you make $5 on each of those 50 cents. Other businesses will look at that and say, oh, spend 50 cents, make $5? If I've got, $400,000 or $500,000 sitting somewhere and I can take every 50-cent piece and make $5 off of it, you're going to be like, yes, I want to get in that business, right? What that might do is draw competition. Would you want more competition in your business? No.
So it still doesn't make any sense why they do it that way, but that's okay.
All right. Again, though, it's because they have to. Because the business world says, I need to know what you are profitable for investment amount. And all of this stuff, in theory, it's supposed to be overhead. And overhead should not be a part of your production factor, which this is what the contribution margin is supposed to be.
Okay, so they want overhead excluded after.
Yep.
That makes sense then.
And that way, when you do report how much profit you made, there are lots of businesses out there that are profitable on a per unit basis, but can't cover their overhead, right? Those businesses are actually, if you think that you can cut the overhead down, those look very attractive to purchase, right? So let's go in, buy this company, fire all of their managers, and just have, instead of 15 managers, let's just have one. Now all of a sudden all of my overhead costs are gone, right? Because managers are part of fixed costs. They don't actually produce anything. They just stand around with their thumb up there, or doing whatever managers do, right? I mean, that's the idea behind it anyways, all right? But it's also because of the law. And again, please remember that a contribution margin is a dollar amount. A break-even point is a number of units amount, okay? Please do not tell me that the break-even point is a dollar amount. You're trying to figure out how many items do I have to sell, all right? So let's do just a mini example. I'll make up some numbers and we can play with it a little bit. All right, so here is a very, very, very shortened version of my, my quarterly report that I send to the government. My cookie company has fixed costs of, let's say, $425,000, Right, so this pays for all the non-productive people in my business. Myself, because as an owner, I don't do any producing. I just stand around and count the money. And any managers that I have, it's also going to cover all of my rent, it's going to cover all of my mortgage, all of the fixed costs of running the business, okay? My average cookie costs, let's say, 40 cents to make. The price of my cookies is, let's say I sell them for $1.85. So imagine, if you will, that the cookies I'm making, they're not like regular round chocolate chip cookies. They're actually special helmet-shaped cookies. And these helmet-shaped cookies have green and yellow frosting on them with a letter G on it. And for some reason, in the state of Wisconsin, people will pay $1.85 to have a cookie like this. Don't ask me why, but they do it every Sunday. All right, so I can ask you basic 2 questions about your business. What is your business's contribution margin? And break-even point. Now again, if you have a real prospectus or a real quarterly report, you would have to break up and show what all those $425,000 worth of fixed costs are, right? So you'd have to have a line item that says, here's how much I paid in rent, here's how much I paid in insurance, here's how much I paid in taxes, here are the utilities that I consider fixed, etc., right? But I'll just add them all up for you and tell you it's just $425,000, right? And the same thing goes with your average costs per cookie, right? Somewhere in there it'll have to say that I made, 4.5 million cookies, and I had this many expenses for labor, this much for raw materials, etc. All right? So, contribution margin. How much money do you earn from each cookie? Or use the formula. The price of your cookies is on average $1.85, maybe more, maybe less, depending on where you're selling them. And the average cost to make each cookie is 40 cents a cookie. Subtract those two, that's your contribution margin. And again, a business-savvy person would look at this and say, ooh, all I have to do is spend 40 cents to make $1.45. That makes general business people salivate. A more than 100% return is always a bonus. All right? So then the break-even point, take your fixed cost, your $425,000 you need to earn to cover your fixed costs, and divide by the $1.45 that you make per cookie. Some annoying number. $293,103.4483. Okay, I've given you all the numbers just to be safe. Obviously, the break-even point needs to be a whole number because you don't sell halves of cookies in the world, in theory. All right? Point 4, your break-even point must be how much you need to spend to cover all of your expenses. If I only make 293,103 cookies, will I cover all of my fixed costs? No, because I need to get another 0.4483 worth of cookies. Therefore, your break-even point is always, no matter what this decimal is, rounded up. Okay? So, in fact, you shouldn't say that you round it up. You basically say that if there is a decimal, go up to the next whole integer, period. Because your break-even point has to guarantee that you have covered all of your costs. There is no loss whatsoever. And if you only make 293,103 cookies, you will still have a loss of about 45 cents. And that's not break-even, okay? So this is 293,104 cookies. Please note that they are cookies, not dollars. If you put a dollar sign there, I will take points off, okay? Because the break-even point represents items, not money. All right? So there is a very, 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 very basic large-scale business analysis, okay? Again, it's pretty basic, but these are things that you should understand. You should understand what contribution margin is, and you should understand what breaking even means, all right? And again, of course, you know, the idea is that you do better than just breaking even, but you got to start there. All right, and that is Chapter 8. Please let me remind you for the homework, skip numbers 14 and 34. I didn't discuss either of those two problems. You can read about them in the text if you'd like, but I don't care about them. It's basically converting back and forth from markup by price to markup by cost, and honestly, I don't care about that, okay? I want you to understand what the two are. I don't care about crossing the line. All righty. On Wednesday. We will review on Monday. So be ready. Have a good weekend, I guess. Yeah, just hit the same dot again, Chelsea.